So we will continue our discussion now on the different laws. We discussed last time the different laws, okay, under Philippines. These are the 8 subjects for the last few years. That's what they do. But right now they're going to merge these 8 subjects into different um, groupings. So before there are 4 weeks, okay, and that 4 Sundays, and then each Sunday it has 2 subjects, one in the morning and the afternoon. But that subjects also has several sub-subjects, which we discussed last time. Okay, so we'll continue our discussion. I recall I stopped on discussing um, the first Sunday only, but I wasn't able to discuss yet some of the subjects under um, other subtopics. Um, yeah. So last time I discussed on the different subjects in the political law, right? Okay. So I discussed that comprehensively. Okay. In the afternoon before they had a subjects on labor law and social legislation, which we discussed already. So there are two major divisions of this labor law. One is in the labor standard and then labor relations. So standards, it means that the employer should have a minimum um, standard that they have to follow, like a minimum wage that they have to pay for their employees. But they can go beyond that minimum, which is allowed. Okay, the standard there simply means that you should not go lower than what the standard. Now into labor relations, it means that it's the relationship between laborers and employers. So they have rights over the rights of the laborers, and which should be protected by the law against the exploitation of the employers. Normally the employers would only want the money, okay, the return of their capital. But in relation to the employees, they may not be responsible, but the law on labor relations give the employees rights, okay, including the labor union, okay, and even rights to strike or right to picketing. So these are discussed in labor relations. Um, and then other social security laws, okay, like the benefits of employees on leaves and overtime, and other related legislations, okay, which would depend on the laws that may be passed by Congress. Every now and then, legislators pass a law that would benefit the employees. After all, uh, they only seek for re-election. So if you pass a law that will probably increase the salary, whoever is the author will eventually has the vote from from the employees. So sometimes they make laws for their own benefit. So I even think of I do not easily believe on the real intention of legislator why they passed that law. Okay, if you recall, most of the benefits that we receive actually comes when the election is coming. Okay, like increase of the salary of the teacher. It's actually a promise. It's one way of vote buying. It may not be a money, but the benefit through in a form of laws could be a factor that will influence the voters. So they are so wise, so we should also be wiser than them. Now we go into the second subject. We have the civil law, okay, and in the afternoon we have taxation. And what are subjects under civil law encompasses persons and family, which I have discussed, the relationship of parents and children, the rights and duties of the family members, the rights of the father to their children as well as the children to their parents when they grow old, and use of family names. Okay, so that is the subject under persons and family relations. How about obligations and contract? I'm just discussing this one for in a very fast way, because these are overview. We'll discuss later on its details. Okay, if we have the luxury of time, a little of the subject that I am reading. Okay, so but for now, it's enough for you to know what is its content. So obligations and contract, these are um, the obligations of the contracting parties. Okay, so there are many forms of contract, like contract of sell, contract of sale, um, deed of donation. Those are contracts which a party should sign, otherwise it will not have any effect. Okay, including even in contract are verbal contracts, like fare in a jeepney. Okay, because contract is defined as meeting of the minds, not necessarily putting into writing. However, there are laws which requires a document to be in a contract to be in a written document. Okay, like sale of a title, land title. Okay, you cannot just simply sell a land through verbal agreement. Okay, it's difficult to prove that. Okay, much so with the conflicts that may arise later on. So that is why there are contracts which need to be in writing. But contracts itself is simply defined as the meeting of the minds. Okay? When we say meeting of the minds, it simply means that both the contracting parties agree on certain terms and conditions. Okay? So if they do not have meeting of the minds, then there's no contract. So what would the other party do if there is no contract actually, or they did not agree, they did not have meeting of the minds? Then they can reform the contract. Okay, a reformation of the contract. Let's say this is what I mean, but he did not understand it as what you mean. So there is what? There's no meeting of the minds. So there's no contracts. So if there's no contract, then there's no obligation that arise. What do you mean by obligation? Obligation simply means that your duty towards what you signed in the contract. Okay, so a contract must be signed personally if it's in writing. However, there are contracts that are not in writing, of course, like if it's less than 500 pesos, okay, so that it may not be in writing. Okay, like um, you borrow a book, okay, you have to return it after 1 week, 1 week. Okay, it is a contract, but it doesn't mean that it should be in writing. Now we go to other laws. We have the property, and still, this is still under civil law that I'm discussing right now. Property. Okay, there in that subject the different types of properties. In general, there are two divisions or of properties. One is real and the other one is personal. Real meaning it is immovable, or even if it be movable, but if the intention of the owner is to put there permanently, then that is a real property, or it simply means immovable. So the other term for real is immovable property. Okay, but do not be misled. But because even if the property is movable, like a machine, if the intention of the owner is to put there permanently, then that is a real property or immovable property. Now, personal, these are things that can be moved, like cars, okay, or that can be transferred from one place to another. Except again, of machinery, where the owner intend it to be there in the factory or in the place permanently, then that machine, although movable from the place where you buy to the place that you're going to put there permanently, becomes now a real property. Okay, at first it's personal, but if you intend to put it there permanently, then that is now real property. What's the rationale, or what's the significance of knowing its distinction? Well, there are significance, one of which is the taxation. Okay, and personal properties are things that can be easily disposed of. Okay, and its tax is also different. In case where there will be a selling of properties, like if a person declares to be in bankrupt. If he declares to be bankrupt, he cannot pay anymore all its debts, then the properties he has, starting from personal property, will be disposed. So that is the first priority. The last will be those real properties. Now we go into succession. What are those subjects under succession? Okay. So what are the things that you will know here? Oh, do not answer in this way. If you were asked what is succession, it is the study of how to success. Okay? That is not what it means by succession. It simply means, in my, just recall, okay, I'm not I do not have anything here, okay, except what I recall in my law school. Okay? But it's although I define it in my way here, it doesn't mean it's the correct. It is just what I understand, but you have to go there, you go to into the definition of what it means. I do not have the luxury of time to discuss all the phrases that defines the subject. Okay? So it will be your lookout. What I'm doing now is just to give you an overview of the subject, or what is the content of that, so that you can understand for now. Okay? Now, succession, of course, what are the things that you're going to learn here? The This would refer to the transfer of properties from the decedent or the person who dies, to the deceased, to the heir. The heir, spelling of heir, it's EIR. Okay? On both personal properties, which would refer to legacy, and if it's a real property, it's called device or device, and the one who will receive that money, or that property, the real property, is called devicee. Okay, those are other terms that you have to learn as early as now. But it's only exclusive in the subject succession. Okay, and it is discussed in the subject, the division of properties, right? For, let's say, there are many children who's going to inherit, then there will be a proper distribution. So a mathematical division of the property left, okay, will be discussed. Okay, like how much property can the mother, and your mother, or the successor, um, surviving spouse, will inherit if the other spouse dies. Okay, so how about the other one? Okay, tort and damages. Tort. Okay, and jokingly, if it is in law school where a professor asks, what's tort? Is it the torta sold was it, where is that part of Cebu which sells torta? Is it in Argao? Okay, tort and damages. That's not the one. Okay, it's not the torta sold in that specific town in Cebu South. Okay, tort simply means that the liabilities of the persons that may incur on violation of contracts. Okay, after all, what we do normally are actually contracts, like riding a jeepney. If the jeep meets an accident, there are liabilities that may incur by the driver, the owner of the vehicle, and the passenger. Okay, and it is all discussed in that subject. Torts. There are many cases of torts and damages. Okay, so who will pay? It's a question that is answered in that subject, torts and damages. Is it the owner? What if the driver is drunk, or he is a, which is normal sometimes, especially if they drive during every Friday or Saturday night, or sometimes drug addict, okay, was in the influence of the methamphetamine hydrochloride or shabu. Who's going to pay? Is it the driver itself, or the owner of the vehicle? And where should the passenger seek relief? Okay, so those are discussed in the subject, torts and damages, including sometimes in cases of criminal offense, there may be damages that may incur, like death of a person after homicide. There may be damages that may be paid to the victim. Okay, it's not only criminal or a penalty in prison. Sometimes, if it's proven, or yeah, if it's basically there are, it's automatic that if you incur or commits a crime, there are also damages, and you have, and the one who committed the crime should pay. In example, let's say a rape or homicide, civil liability is automatically attached. It's not only imprisonment, but they have to pay also damages. The judge will determine how much are they going to pay. Normally, if a person dies, let's say in a vehicular accident, aside from homicide, of course, you cannot file anymore. The victims cannot be compensated because he dies. But the family should be given it's like a retribution or in the form of damages. So 50,000, it's worth of a life of a person. But if he is alive, like he is only disabled, became disabled after the accident, then he has to pay until his death, or he has to pay computing his life expectancy and the possibility of the income that he might have had he not been in an accident, victim of accident. That is the computation. So what's the lifespan now? It's 80. 80. I think 80. You have to divide that. Okay, you have to deduct the life he has now from the expected life that he has to live, and then you have to compute the salary that he lost simply because of that accident. Okay, so that's it. We go into the afternoon. What is the subject in the afternoon? Under the old schedule, but right now there are different schedule. So, but taxation is now included in political law. So one or two questions from this one. Okay, but before it's a separate. Um, it's a subject in accountancy. Okay, but in law school we also discussed this one. Okay, well, as expected, many students will fail because this is a, aside from memorization, there's also a computation. But it will not be asked anymore of how are you going to compute the specific tax. Probably will only be asked the exact percentage or the principle, but as to its computation, it will not be asked. Now, what are under it? Taxation, National Internal Revenue Code. Okay, it's a thick book colored green. You can buy it in national, in the Rex bookstore, which sells all the books. Okay, so If you do not understand what I'm discussing right now, there's a there's a place where you can visit. I would recommend the Rex Bookstore. All of your answers will be all of your questions, all of your queries will be answered there. In fact, my discussion now are actually found in that Rex Bookstore. Okay, so if you have the luxury of of money, you can buy all the books if should you wish. Okay, and display it in your house. Put a bookshelf there. Display all the books in the Rex bookstore. Okay, people will be impressed if you have that. Now, what are under that? Under the National Internal Revenue Code, we have, of course, the different tax rate, okay, or taxes of different sources of income. Okay, so of course we will not discuss how to compute the tax. It would take time to discuss with you how to compute the tax, but in general, um, it simply means that if all workers actually paid a certain percentage to, what's that sound, to the government. What, am I still here? For what?